Hello everyone, welcome to TechScent, and let's continue with this Python tutorial. So far we know how to use built-in functions like print, sum, max, min, and so on. But imagine that we could write our own function. But why do you need to write your own function? I'll give you a scenario. Let's say you're building a project that consists of thousands of lines of code. You won't write them on the same file. Instead, you will write them in reusable functions you created in separate files. Right now, let's create a function. We use the def keyword, which means define, to create a function. Then, we need to name this function, so I'll say greet. And we open parentheses, then we add a colon. What comes next is a block of code that belongs to this function. What I'll say print hello world. And just like any other function, we need to call it. So how do we do it? By mentioning its name. So we say greet, and if I run my code, I should get hello world. I could call it multiple times, let's say greet 2 times. I should get hello 2 times. So hello world, hello world. Do you know the round function which takes an input from the user, like so? This is called an argument. So how could we do a function that takes an argument? So I'm gonna define a function and call it add. It will add 2 numbers. And inside those parentheses, I could mention parameters. So num1, num2. Parameters are actually the input. So I'll add a colon, and then I'll say print num1 plus num2. Then of course, we need to call this function. I'll say add, and inside those parentheses, we need to mention the arguments, which is the actual value of the parameter. So I'll say 5 and 4. What we will get is definitely 9. Of course, we could recall this function, so add and give it different arguments. So 10 and let's say another 10, so we got 20. There is 2 types of functions. The function that performs the task, like my add function over here, it adds up 2 numbers and prints them in the console. That function is a function that performs a task. But we have another type of function which returns a value. So instead of printing it to the console, it returns a value that can be stored somewhere. So let me delete all of this. I'm gonna define a function that subtracts 2 numbers, sub num1 and num2. This time I'm gonna use the return keyword. So I'm gonna say return, and what I'm gonna mention is num1 minus num2. Now, we know that the return keyword actually returns us a value. So that means we could store this value inside of a variable. I could say x equal to sub, I'm calling my function, and I need to mention num1 and num2. Let's say 5 and 4. Then I could do whatever I want with the x variable. I could print it, let's say. So print x, we should get 1. Right. I could add it with another number, let's say x plus 3. I should get 4. Now there's a more simpler way to write this. I could just write it in one line by saying print sub, and I mentioned 5 and 4. And we got the same output, which is 1. It is much simpler and less lines. Now the add function is a function that performs a task, while the sub function is a function that returns us a value and we could use it elsewhere. Now which function is more useful? Well, both are actually useful, the performing task function and the returning a value function. But the function that returns a value allows you to modify the given output, unlike the function that simply prints the answer to the console. Next we have keyword arguments. Let me define a function that will greet the user. This function will take 2 parameters, the name and last name. I will print hello name and last name. Of course, I need to call my function, so I'll say greet, and the name will be, let's say, John, and last name will be Smith, let's say. Let's see what we will get. Hello, John Smith. Now, what are keyword arguments? Keyword arguments are actually the parameter of the given argument. That means I could specify the parameter of the argument by simply writing its name followed by an equal sign. That means right over here I could mention the parameter, which is name followed by an equal sign. I could do the same thing for the last name. So last name equal to sign Smith. Now, why are they useful? Well, they make it more readable for you and easier to identify the parameters. As you can see, the output didn't change, but the only difference with the function before is that the parameters are written down here. We could also use formatted strings. So I'll say print f followed by double quotes. I'll say hello, and what I'm gonna do next is I'm gonna mention curly brackets. Inside curly brackets, I'm gonna say name and another curly brackets, last name. So last name. Nothing has changed, but this is another way to print strings. We know by far that we need to mention every parameter we put in a function, but we could make them optional. I'll define a function that adds two numbers, num1, num2, print num1 plus num2, call the function add 4 and 5. So how to make a parameter optional? It's actually easy. We could assign to it a default value. So I'll say num2 equal to 4. Now when you set a default value, you can by not mention the second argument. So if I take it off, I should get 8. So we got 8 because 4 plus the default value, which is 4, becomes 8. And if you add a argument, definitely num2 is equal to 7. So we'll get 11. Let's say you want to mention multiple arguments. What you'll do is you'll mention a comma over here, write some different numbers, but you'll get an error. That's because we don't have parameters for those three numbers. We only have two parameters. So what to do here? I could delete all of those parameters and mention a asterisk sign and name something like nums. So right now I could just print nums and let's see what will happen. So nums, and let me run my program. We got a tuple of my mentioned values over here. But let's say I want to find the product of all of the elements inside of my tuple. What to do is I could actually iterate from my tuple by using a for loop. So for I in nums, but before I should mention a variable, which I'll call it res, means result, and I'll set it to 1. What I'll say here is res multiplied by I. So first I will be 5. 5 multiplied by 1 is 5. Res will be equal to 5. I then will become 4. So 5 multiplied by 4, it will be 20, and so on for the other numbers. So let me print right now my res function. So res, let's see what we'll get. We got 1200 as an output. Now, could you add double asterisk sign? Well, of course you can. So first, let me declare or call my function, so family, and inside those parentheses, I could mention multiple arguments with their parameters. I could say the father in this family is called John. So John, comma, the mother is called, let's say, Kelly, and they have one kid, and that kid's name is, let's say, David. So David. Right here, I could print the fam. So print fam. Of course, you don't mention the double asterisk sign. And what do you think I will get as an output? I got a dictionary. The key, which is father, has a value of John. The key mother has a value of Kelly. And the same thing for the kid that's called David. Also, I could use bracket notation to fetch individual elements from this dictionary. Let's say I said fam brackets and I mentioned the key. So let's say father, I should get John. If I said, let's say kid, so I'll say kid, I should get David. And yep, we got David. Alright, that is it for functions in Python. Thank you so much for watching today's video. This is TechScent and see you in the next one.